Hey, so you've ordered a pre-board keyboard from us, and that's got Hotswap switches in there, and you're planning to install switches yourself. So here's how you do that. First of all, you're gonna need your pre-built keyboard and a screwdriver. First thing we'll do is remove the bottom plate. Now you might think, well, why don't I just stick the switches straight in there without removing the bottom plate? And the issue with that is, if you do that, you can damage the Hotswap socket, and also it may push the PCB out of place. So it's really best to remove the bottom plate while installing your own switches. So we'll remove all the screws here. Alright, here we go. We'll set the bottom plate aside, and also we'll remove these middle layers since they might get in the way while we're installing switches. Alright, so now that we've done that, you'll see that we've got these 4 placeholder switches that we've installed for you, just to kind of keep the PCB in place, and we'll just remove those switches first and set them aside. Next, we'll install switches in the corners, similar to how you saw them pre-installed. So we'll stick 2 of them in first at these top 2 corners. And the one thing to note here is, as we're putting the switches in, first of all, make sure the switch pins here are straight, or else they'll potentially damage the socket. And while I'm pushing the switch in, put your thumb underneath the socket here for support to make sure it doesn't get pushed down by accident, and then just squeeze the switch and the socket together. Same thing with this other switch here to the right. Squeeze down on the socket and the top of the switch. We'll do the same for these 2 slots here. Here I'm still supporting the bottom of the Hotswap socket. Same here. And there you go. Now, next step is to make sure that these switches are aligned within their acrylic plate. If you've got an F44 plate, you don't have to worry about this, but for acrylic plate, you may have to have some issues. Otherwise, if you don't do this next step, you'll find that you won't be able to insert these 2 switches in properly. So make sure that the switches are centered within the cutouts here, these kind of rectangular shaped cutouts. So make sure there's an equal gap here and here. Once you've done that, just verify that you can put in the thumb switches in by sticking those in next. And we'll just double check that those are seated in properly. Now that those are in, we'll just insert the rest of these switches here. And just be really careful to make sure that all the switch pins are straight before you insert them in. And don't forget to support the bottom of the Hotswap socket. If you find that you are needing to put a lot of force while sticking a switch in, yeah, that means you're probably doing something wrong. Just make sure, again, that the switch pin is straightened out. Alright, now that we've inserted all the switches in here, just check all the switches, make sure that they're level with the top plate here. Tighten up any of the standoffs that might have gotten loose while we were unscrewing the bottom plate. So we'll tighten that up there. Stick this one back on. Okay, so all the stands have been tightened up. Now is a good idea to plug in the keyboard into computer, run it through a switch tester, make sure everything's working all right before you close up the rest of the case. But assuming everything checks out fine, go ahead and reassemble the case. So we'll stick the middle layer back on over the standoffs. Put the bottom plate back on. And we'll start screwing the bottom plate on again. There you go. You've completed installation of the switches into your Hotswap board.